You know that feeling, right? Staring at a blank page or a blank screen, a project that just refuses to get started? That feeling of being totally, hopelessly stuck. But what if that whole idea, what we call writer's block, is actually a huge misunderstanding of what's really going on in our brains?
Let's just start with this idea for a second. The feeling of being blocked isn't some real external wall that you've slammed into. It's an internal belief you've built, basically a story you're telling yourself that writing is impossible right now. And here's the thing about a belief. If you built it, you can take a look at it, and you can change it.
So this brings us to a really powerful way to reframe the problem. Instead of thinking of it as this personal failing called writer's block, what if we called it conditional writing? It totally shifts the question. It's no longer, what's wrong with me? Instead, it's, okay, what's wrong with my current conditions?
Conditional writing is this simple but pretty profound idea that most of us can write. We just can't always do it under the very specific and often invisible set of rules we've created for ourselves. The block isn't a total failure, it's specific. I mean, you can probably still write an email or a shopping list, right? The problem is you can't write the one thing you want to write, and that, right there, is a condition.
And what is so fascinating is that once you start looking for these creative conditions, you find them absolutely everywhere. Especially when you look at the bizarre and kind of brilliant habits of the world's most famous writers.
These creative needs tend to fall into four main buckets. You've got environmental, which is all about your space. Somatic, that's about your body. Instrumental is about the tools you use. And psychological, which is all about your state of mind.
For some people, the condition is instrumental. Take Alexandre Dumas, the guy who wrote The Three Musketeers. He could only write his fiction on blue paper. It was like a trigger, a specific signal to his brain that it was time to create. If he tried to use a different color, the condition wasn't met, and the writing wouldn't happen.
For others, the condition was purely psychological. So when Dr. Seuss got stuck, he didn't just try to force his way through it. He would go into a secret closet filled with over 300 hats. Putting one on was his ritual. It was like it gave him permission to be playful, to access that absurd, creative state his work required.
And some of these rituals, well, they're a mix of everything. Every single morning, the novelist John Cheever would put on a full suit, take the elevator down to his basement, strip down to his underwear, and only then would he start to write. He was creating this third space for himself that was neither home nor office, and he was literally shedding his domestic persona to access his creative self. And these examples just go to show the sheer variety of our environmental needs. I mean, some writers, like Marcel Proust, had to be horizontal. He famously wrote in bed. Others, like Agatha Christie, needed what you might call hydroimmersion. She got her best plot ideas while sitting in the bathtub. And for many others, it was the kinetic rhythm of a moving vehicle that got their thoughts flowing.
Okay, so these habits are way more than just quirky little anecdotes. They actually reveal something fundamental about how our brains work. So let's see how we can turn these insights into a practical toolkit for managing our own creativity.
I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? Why do these seemingly illogical, sometimes downright bizarre rituals actually prove to be so effective? What's the mechanism here?
The answer, really, is all about reducing anxiety. That blank page can be terrifyingly uncertain. But a ritual, whether it's brewing a specific kind of tea or putting on a silly hat, gives you a sense of control. It quiets down that anxious part of your brain, and that frees up precious brain power for the actual act of creation.
We can also kind of engineer this state by managing our flow channel. Think of it like this. If a task feels way too hard for our current skill level, we get anxious and we avoid it. That's pretty much the feeling of writer's block. But if the task is way too easy, we get bored and distracted. The sweet spot, that flow channel, is right there in the middle, and finding it is a condition we can actively create for ourselves.
So, yeah, building the perfect set of conditions is a really powerful strategy. But what happens when your conditions aren't just a little imperfect, but totally impossible? What if you have no paper, no freedom, not even control of your own body? This is where we get into the stories of writers for whom the obstacle isn't a distraction, it actually becomes the material of their work. These are the unconditional writers. When the Kenyan author Ngugi wa Thiong'o was thrown in prison and denied all writing materials, he refused to be silenced. So he started writing his novel, Devil on the Cross, on the only medium that was available to him, scraps of the coarse toilet paper they issued in the prison.
The journalist Behuz Buchani was held for years in an Australian offshore detention center. He wrote his entire award-winning book, No Friend But the Mountains, in secret,
by tapping it out one text at a time on a hidden smartphone and sending it out through thousands of WhatsApp messages.
And then there's this. After a catastrophic stroke left him with locked-in syndrome, completely paralyzed except for his left eye, the magazine editor Jean-Dominique Bobby composed an entire memoir. It took over 200,000 blinks as a person recited the alphabet to him, over and over and over again.
These stories, they show us that under the most extreme pressure imaginable, writing isn't just a profession or a hobby, it's a survival mechanism. It is proof of your own personhood. It's an act of defiance, a way to make sure that even if the person telling the story is silenced, the story itself survives.
This incredibly powerful idea of creating against all odds, of working with what you have instead of just waiting for what you don't, can actually be expanded from a writing philosophy into a philosophy for life.
And that brings us to this idea of unconditional living. It really means valuing adaptation over perfection. It's about seeing the world not as a set of problems designed to stop you, but as a dynamic environment that's full of resources if you just learn how to look for them.
And it works kind of like a cycle. First, you find the hidden opportunities around you. Then you stabilize the useful ones into reliable habits. You learn to work with the world's limitations, not just rage against them. And finally, you learn how to break free from the unhelpful old patterns that keep you stuck.
Ultimately, the entire difference comes down to this one thing: our relationship with the obstacle. Do you see a limitation as a wall that's just there to stop you? Or could it be the raw material, a constraint that actually forces you to become more creative, more resourceful, and, in the end, more resilient?
So this leaves us with a final question to consider for ourselves. In our work, in our lives, what are the conditions that we've placed on our own progress? And more importantly, what hidden affordances, what toilet paper, what smartphone, what single blinking eye are right there in front of us, just waiting to be used?